Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video by the boxing channel, of course, known as DontaesBoxingNation. And I like to review his videos a lot of the times, really for a multitude of reasons. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later on as the video transgresses or as it goes along. But, anyways, this video is mainly going to be about that of Mr. Gervonta Tank Davis. And of course, for those of us that did recently watch the fight, or for those of us that, heard the news, Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, was able to take the very next big step up in his career. I'm not going to say that he for sure right now is the face of boxing, but let's just say, for example, if Canelo Alvarez, if he really is dwindling to the degree that a lot of people predict that he is, Gervonta Tank Davis, in my view, certainly would be my number one vote for being the new face of boxing, if he isn't already. But like I said, that'll also depend on how well Canelo Alvarez does within these next couple years, especially, or maybe by the end of this year, because he does, I believe, plan to rematch Dimitri Bivol, and that could heavily affect his career, whether he wins or loses. So let's see what happens on that. And of course, I'll put on my fight prediction on that fight and my breakdown when that fight actually gets announced. But anyways, neither here nor there. But Gervonta Tank Davis, of course, was able to get so far probably the biggest win of his career against King Ryan Garcia. And certain people may disagree with that. I would say more than likely that Ryan Garcia was probably the most talented and probably the biggest threat that Gervonta Tank Davis has ever fought in his career. And of course, it's a great win in his career, at least when you talk about from a monetary and a brand perspective. But when you really talk about from the image perspective, like I said, or not image, excuse me, but when you really talk about the resume perspective, and I already said this for both fighters going in, because both fighters, in my view, they don't really have A-grade resumes, and certain people would disagree. And I know I'm going to get certain people on here that say, well, Ryan Garcia clearly doesn't have an A-grade resume, but Gervonta Tank Davis, what are you talking about? He beat Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Mario Barrios, Rolly Romero, and now Ryan Garcia. And that's great, but let's be real. There's a reason why the Ryan Garcia fight, why it was looked at partially as the biggest fight in Gervonta Tank Davis's career. Not just because Ryan Garcia also had the big Instagram followers and the great following and the look and blah, 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 and the great hype behind him, but there was a lot of people, including myself, that pretty much agreed that Ryan Garcia was going to be the biggest threat so far in Gervonta Tank Davis's career. And I think that Gervonta Tank Davis is a tremendous fighter. He's an absolutely magnificent fighter when he's on his best. But the fact that Ryan Garcia so far is the best opponent in your career, and you almost have 30 fights now, like what, you're 29-0, that really says a lot about your resume. It's no offense, but the three best wins in his career is probably against Mario Barrios, Ryan Garcia, and what's his name, Leo Santa Cruz. Like, those are probably the three best wins in your career. And when those are the three best wins in your career, I don't think that I can really 100% put you on my top 10 pound for pound list, especially when you really have only won a belt, at least a real belt, in one particular weight division. And some people, and I've had certain people say this to me in the past, what are you talking about? Gervonta Tank Davis is a three-weight division champion. Well, is he really a three-weight division champion, or did he win a legitimate belt when he beat Jose Pedraza, I believe either at the 126 or 130 pound weight division? Did he win a legitimate belt there? And then in the other two weight divisions, did he pretty much just win regular titles? I think it was at the 130 pound weight division. I don't know if Gervonta was ever as low as 126. But anyways, Gervonta Tank Davis, and I've already said this, this goes for any fighter. If you only win regular or interim or intercontinental titles, I'm sorry, those are not real titles to me. When I take a look at Joe Joyce, he recently had some sort of title, I believe, when he recently lost to Zhang, or whatever the man's name was, the Chinese fighter, I believe. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, well, Joe Joyce, he was one of the heavyweight champions of the world, because he wasn't one of the heavyweight champions of the world. You have to have one of the four legitimate belts. No one says, oh, Devin Haney, he's the undisputed champion, but Gervonta Tank Davis, he's a real champion there. I'm sorry, it just is what it is. If you're a regular champion, you're not a champion. That's just the way that I view it. You have to have one of the four legitimate belts. But whether Gervonta Tank Davis is able to get belts off these next fighters or not, the Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson fights, those are really the fights that people want to see, including myself, because those are really going to be the near future threats. And Gervonta Tank Davis, I believe, is already 28 years old. And like I said, he almost has 30 fights on his resume. And it's about time that he gets into the ring with someone that is a clear 100% A-grade fighter. And I think that Ryan Garcia more than likely was an A-grade fighter, but at the same time, I'm not really 100% sure because Ryan Garcia himself doesn't really have the best of resumes. But the question is that will Gervonta Tank Davis, will he get in the ring with one of these gentlemen next between Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney? And Dante is also going to say certain things that are going to be very particularly interesting as well. But it's going to be very interesting once again to see where Gervonta Tank Davis's career goes. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what he has to say.
Pound for pound, best fighter in the world. It's Devin's time. It's Haney time.
You talked all that shit? Yeah, now what? It's time now. Yeah, for the best.
Dontae's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So now there are three kings in the sport of boxing: Devin Haney, Gervonta Tank Davis, and Shakur Stevenson, the Michael Jordans of the sport. Now, even though Devin Haney...
Now, listen to what Dontaes Boxing Nation just said. He said that they're the Michael Jordans of the sport. And if you've seen Dontaes' past videos, you know that especially when they tried to call Canelo Alvarez the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, he said they're trying to call Canelo Alvarez the Michael Jordan of the sport. And Dante always had a problem with that. And people always try to tell me whenever I review Dontaes' videos, they say, oh, well, Dante just tells the truth. You're just hating all this sort of bullshit because Canelo, he doesn't do this. He don't do that. He's not that skilled, blah, blah, blah. Listen, for anyone who truly knows boxing, Canelo Alvarez at his best, he truly is an all-time great fighter. And, sometimes I get some of these guys on my channel, these these rockheads who don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And they say, oh, well, Canelo, he's just an average Mexican fighter who was promoted and blah, blah, blah. And that's the truth of it. No, dude, that's not the truth of it. You just really have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. And it's okay because most people in general really don't know what the fuck they're talking about, especially in terms of boxing. Most people really don't know much about the sweet science. But when you talk about someone like Canelo Alvarez is up there with a lot of all-time great fighters. You cannot have the names on his resume like Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, Danny Jacobs, Araceli Lara, Miguel Cotto, Sergey Kovalev, Austin Trout, Gennady Triple G Golovkin. You cannot have the names on his resume that he has and not be an all-time great fighter. And on top of that, unified A-weight division at 168 pounds, completely unified it, won every legitimate belt there, and be a 4-weight division champion and have the skill set and the level of dominance that he has had and just be an average fighter. That doesn't make any sense. But it is what it is. But once again, Dante always had an issue with Canelo Alvarez because people were trying to rank him as the deserved, by the way, #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. I don't think that he is right now because, of course, he lost to Bivol not too long ago. And even after that, certain people would debate it. I'm not sure if I would, but I understand it. So the one would think, okay, maybe if Dante is really trying to be objective here and fair, maybe he's just thinking that Canelo Alvarez, maybe he needs results. Maybe he needs that. But all of a sudden, Shakur Stevenson, Gervonta Tank Davis, and Devin Haney, apparently they're the Michael Jordans of the sport, which is very particularly interesting because Canelo Alvarez, he apparently couldn't be the best because he was beating these weak European white boys when it came down to it. And Gervonta Tank Davis, if we're going to use the point, oh, well, Canelo Alvarez, he was avoiding elite competition, which I've never bought into that shit anyway. Well, Gervonta Tank Davis, let's just say if we were going by that narrative, Gervonta Tank Davis clearly had not seemed interested in fighting Devin Haney, nor Lomachenko, nor some of the other guys. So why is Gervonta Tank Davis counted as one of the kings in boxing? And if we're talking about weak European white boys, Devin Haney is one of your top 5 pound-for-pound fighters when the only fighter that he's ever beat that is even close to A grade is George Kambosos. Like, come on, what's really going on here? So once again, and Dante, in my view, he does not always bring up bad points. A lot of the points that he brings up, I think that they have some merit. But when you, like I said, you have to be very careful, with who you trust and, who you, depend on for a logical breakdown because Dante, a lot of the times, it's no offense, but he has no logic and no objectivity whatsoever. Because Dante, in my view, that, like I said, there's certain things that he said that are truthful. Like when there's certain times that ESPN, they do promote certain fighters over black fighters in order to make the list look a little bit more mixed, or to try to put, Caucasians or other fighters on top of the list. Yes, you can debate that. There's a little bit of that there. But when you're basically just going to do the same thing on your channel and on your pound for pound list, then I really don't want to hear any bitching. I really don't want to hear overall how you're just objective and how truthful you are, all this other bullshit, when really that's not really what you're about. Dante, at the end of the day, he cannot give certain fighters credit because he has a very big racial issue. It just is what it is. And he's not a logical and objective commentator. He's just not. And none of the LDBC and new media are. I really don't give a fuck who has a problem with it. That's just the way that it is. All right? None of them are, because all of them are part of a pro-racial cult. All right? And if you break that bond, they'll go after you. That's why when Shakur Stevenson at one point in time called DontaesBoxingNation biased, all of them attacked him when it came down to it. Because if you go against that narrative, they'll call you a sellout. They'll call you a coon. They'll basically say that you're trying to appease other fan bases. And sometimes they are trying to appease other fan bases, but sometimes not. But it is what it is. But right now, just to talk about the quote-unquote three kings of boxing, would I say that these guys are the three kings of boxing? I wouldn't say that they're the three kings of boxing, but I would say that they're the three kings of 135. Unless Lomachenko, of course, can prove different. Because I don't see anyone, at least within the next couple of fights, beating these gentlemen unless they fight each other. So I'll say that, but what I will say is this. Where would I place these guys in terms of the pound-for-pound list, at least at the moment? Well, Gervonta Tank Davis would still be right outside my top 10, because I still think that his resume is lacking. And on top of that, he has no legitimate belt at the current moment in time. And I have a rule, at least more than likely, that on my top 10 pound-for-pound list, unless you recently vacated belts and you're moving up a weight division and you're a great champion, you cannot be on my top 10 pound-for-pound list if you don't have a belt. So Gervonta Tank Davis right now is not on my list. Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney, they both are. They're probably anywhere from that 6 to 10 spot, but probably more than likely anywhere from 8 to 10, because both of their resumes, in my view, are also going to have to improve a little bit. Devin Haney's biggest win in his career is over George Kambosos, a fighter that, in my view, kind of fought a Teofimo Lopez that underestimated him, not really giving an excuse or anything. But George Kambosos is not going to beat anyone that is truly A+ when, they fight them on a good night. He's almost kind of like Carlos Baldomir. Like, he was able to beat Zab Judy, that one fighter that everyone looked at as very talented. But then when he got in the ring with pretty much every other A-grade fighter, he lost. Or, a better comparison, might be, like I'm trying to think here. I don't want to say Jermaine Taylor, because in my view, Jermaine Taylor was more talented. And don't get me wrong, George Kambosos is talented. He's just not A+ talented. I'm not really even sure, excuse me, if he's A-grade talented. Because I don't think that he beats any of the three fighters on the screen. I don't think he beats Lomachenko. And I'm not quite sure if he beats Teofimo Lopez in a rematch. Just my view of it. But, it is what it is. And as for Shakur Stevenson, the Oscar Valdez win was a very good win. It was a great win. It was an A-grade win. But like I said, I need to see a little bit more. Because to be within my top 5 pound-for-pound, you more than likely have to have a multitude of A-grade wins, or you have to accomplish something great within your career over a certain amount of time, like that of a Terrence Bud Crawford. So, like I said, the 5 fighters that I have within my top 5, I have Terrence Bud Crawford there, although some could debate that he's not there. Errol Spence is there. Tyson Fury, a lot of people have a problem with that, but it is what it is. He is the best heavyweight in the world, and he does have a good resume for the heavyweight division. Alexander Usyk and Canelo Alvarez. You could easily put Dimitri Bivol there. You could put other fighters there. Maybe a Shakur Stevenson there, and certain other fighters there. You could easily put them there as well. Some would debate Jamel Charlo, any one of those fighters there.
Is the undisputed champion and the youngest undisputed champion in the sport of boxing. He still has to get past Lomachenko, which I personally don't believe is going to be an easy fight. No one has...
I hope it's not an easy fight, because I hope that Lomachenko puts up a good fight, but just the way that he fought against both Jermaine Ortiz and Teofimo Lopez, Abel Sanchez actually brought up a very decent breakdown. He said that he doesn't believe that Lomachenko is going to be an easy fight for Devin Haney either. And all of Abel Sanchez's breakdowns are usually pretty intelligent, from what I notice. Of course, he was the trainer of the fighter in Gennady Golovkin, when Golovkin, of course, lost a rematch against Canelo. But he still comes across to me as a very decently competent trainer and a decent boxing analyst, at least with certain analyzations that I've seen. But anyways, when it comes down to it, he said that he also believes that Lomachenko is going to give Devin Haney a lot of problems. And he has the potential to do that, but I'm not quite sure if Lomachenko, if he has the size, if he has, the wherewithal, and on top of that, if he's going to have the stamina. And he does have great stamina, but I'm starting to notice that Lomachenko, especially against these bigger fighters, it's getting harder and harder for him to really do this against some of these guys because these guys are bigger than him. Some of them are stronger than him. They outreach him. So he already has to do extra work. And on top of that, he can't really fight in a more defensive style because he has a 65-inch arm reach. So he's going to have to get in there. He's going to have to get in there against Devin Haney, and he's going to have to really risk getting hurt. And I'm saying this, even if Lomachenko does win the fight, I'm not really sure if Lomachenko is really going to be much better after that fight because that might take pretty much everything that Lomachenko has. That might take everything out of him. There are certain times where, an athlete in particular, they give their all in a particular series or in a particular event, and then after that, they might not be the same for a while. And Lomachenko, once again, he's 35, and he's a very offensive-minded fighter. So, we'll see. Or I should say offensive, mainly style fighter.
Beat Vasyl Lomachenko and made it look easy. So if Devin Haney goes out there and does that, that is going to be extremely impressive. Don't pay attention to what old media and these race fans are saying on the internet, because even though it remains to be seen, these are just backhand compliments when you hear these fans making excuses for why Devin Haney is going to win the fight. That's a racist fan's way of saying, man, this kid Devin Haney is really special. It's no different than a non-black boxing fan telling you why he hates Floyd Mayweather so much, and then when someone who's not black emerges, he says, that guy right there is the Mexican Floyd. Or if a fan hates Floyd Mayweather's gut.
Listen, what I'll say is this. I agree that if you were one of the ones that had Lomachenko recently beating Devin Haney, and you were talking all this shit about how Lomachenko was going to beat up Devin Haney, and then now all of a sudden you're changing your tune now that the fight was actually about to happen, you should stick to your prediction. Because that would show me that you had no courage in that prediction and that you did not really believe what you were talking about. Or if you're one of the guys that had Lomachenko above Devin Haney previously before this fight was announced, you should still predict Lomachenko.
And says that Floyd is garbage, he's this and he's that, but then they praise Canelo Alvarez and they say you got to give Canelo a pass because he lost to Floyd Mayweather. These are fans that are acknowledging how great fighters like Floyd Mayweather and Devin Haney are. They just wish they came in a different color. So while there's no
I agree, and you do the same thing with Canelo Alvarez.
Guarantee that Devin Haney will beat Vasyl Lomachenko, assuming he does, the obvious big super fight to make would be Devin Haney versus Shakur Stevenson or Gervonta Tank Davis versus Devin Haney or Shakur. I told you guys
I would love to see that fight, but Gervonta Tank Davis has apparently already stated, at least from recent news, from what I heard, that he actually wants to fight Lomachenko, whether Lomachenko wins or loses the fight against Devin Haney, which is kind of alarming to me because there's no offense against Gervonta Tank Davis, but it's like, come on, it's about time for you to get in the ring with the big boys now. You're 28 years old. You've never gotten in the ring with someone that was a legitimate 100% certified A-grade fighter. Ryan Garcia, in my view, was an A-grade fighter, more than likely, but we still don't know that much about Ryan Garcia. He could get in the ring with Isaac Pitbull Cruz or Willie Romero, within the next year and completely lose that fight. He could get knocked out. Who knows?
Comes to Gervonta Tank Davis. Now that he beat Ryan Garcia, there's going to be so much pressure on him to fight either Devin Haney or Shakur Stevenson next. And the only other fight outside of Devin or Shakur Stevenson for Gervonta Tank Davis that does make sense would be the winner of Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez. And it turns
that'd be a great fight, but I don't see Gervonta Tank Davis taking that fight. At least at the moment. Gervonta Tank Davis once again, and I like Gervonta. He's a tremendous fighter. Truly has the opportunity to become the future number one pound for pound. I believe that he has that type of potential. But a long time ago, he said how you can knock out Josh Taylor and do this and do that. It was almost like Jamal Charlo against David Benavidez, where he talked all this shit, and then as soon as Josh Taylor, kind of like how David Benavidez called Jamal Charlo's bluff, all of a sudden, those two were quiet. So I don't really want to hear Gervonta Tank Davis or anyone talk about that fight until I know that Gervonta Tank Davis is actually serious about possibly facing one of those guys. And I'm not quite sure if he is, at least at the moment, which is fine. but then quit running your mouth about it.
Floyd Mayweather actually said that he wants to see Gervonta Tank Davis versus Teofimo Lopez. He said this before the Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight. I don't know exactly.
That'd be a very interesting fight. But Teofimo, he would have to move better in that fight. That would be a very interesting fight because Teofimo, in my view, at his best, is still probably a better fighter than Ryan Garcia. But Teofimo, he's going to have to really get his mind straight. He's really suffered a lot of mental issues within the past couple of years, especially ever since his loss to George Kambosos. He has not been able to handle it well at all. And I get it. A lot of boxers especially don't like to lose. It's very humiliating. But Teofimo is going to have to get better. And he really has looked lost mentally within the past couple of fights. So that Josh Taylor fight, that's going to be very interesting. And I'm probably not going to predict him to win that fight. I wouldn't be shocked. But I would say Josh Taylor probably does have to be the favorite.
How long it was, but I know it was probably a week or a couple of weeks before the fight.
The lightweight division got so much talent. Devin Haney and Shakur Stevens. That's a great matchup. Teofimo Lopez and Gervonta Tank Davis. The best should fight the best, but a lot of times people don't really understand it don't work like that in boxing. It's not that one fighter is scared of the other. It's just everything is about timing. But the best should fight the best in today's era.
Well, sometimes it is timing, Floyd, but let's also be real. Gervonta Tank Davis, and I'm not sure if it's you. I'm not sure if it's Gervonta Tank Davis. I'm not sure who the fuck it is. But Gervonta Tank Davis has really been protected against a lot of the true A-grade fighters for a very long time. And like I said, for Floyd Mayweather Jr. saying not too long ago about Canelo Alvarez allegedly ducking David Benavidez, and I've never, alleged any of that when it came down to it, because Canelo has always showed me that Canelo is usually going to get in the ring, eventually at least, with the A-grade fighters, no matter who they are. So that's what Canelo has showed me. So like I said back then, before you talk shit about other fighters, you better check your boy Gervonta Tank Davis, your mentor, or excuse me, not your mentor, but your protege.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack.
Because like I said, Gervonta Tank Davis is 28 years old. And he hasn't gotten in the ring with anyone yet that I still believe is a certified A+ fighter.
Just that little small clip of what Floyd Mayweather just said right there. Let me first start off by saying Gervonta Tank Davis versus the winner of Josh Taylor and Teofimo Lopez will definitely be a big fight.
It would be a big fight, but to be quite honest with you, I would like to see Gervonta Tank Davis, at least for his sake, if he was going to take on that fight. I would prefer to see him versus the winner of Lomachenko versus Devin Haney first, because I'm not quite sure if Gervonta Tank Davis would be accustomed to that size. Now, of course, he was able to beat Ryan Garcia and Mario Barrios, but Josh Taylor or Teofimo Lopez, whoever is the winner of that fight, they're going to be on a completely different level.
Especially considering the fact that Josh Taylor and Teofimo, they've never been knocked out before. If Teofimo Lopez beats Josh Taylor, there's no doubt about it. Davis versus Teofimo Lopez will be a huge fight. Let's not forget Teofimo Lopez is part of the original quote-unquote Fantastic Four that old media created. And the way Teofimo Lopez talks, the promotion for that fight would definitely be huge. Now, if Josh Taylor wins the fight, then Gervonta has an opportunity to fight the former undisputed junior welterweight champion, who will still be undefeated at the time they fight. Now, when Floyd Mayweather said the best should fight the best, but it doesn't work like that in the sport of boxing, he's admitting that he doesn't see Teofimo Lopez as one of the best, but he does see Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney as one of the best, and he wants to see them fight against each other right now, which will definitely be the best fighting the best. The only way this scenario would make a...
So that also means that Gervonta Tank Davis is not one of the best either. Because no offense against Gervonta Tank Davis, but has he been ruthlessly calling out Devin Haney, or did he ruthlessly call out Lomachenko those few years ago when he was looked at as #1 pound for pound? Like I said, Dante always likes to create these standards, and I get it. I don't like to go by those standards because a lot of the times when people are alleging that a fighter is avoiding someone, I think that they're being a little bit too hasty. But if you want to be like that, okay, cool. Be consistent. And Dante is never consistent. The only time that he ever uses that is with fighters, let's be real, that don't have melanin. That's the only time. And listen, I get it. It's cool to cover black fighters in a great way because a lot of them can be victims, of course, of, racial, double standards. All that's cool. but you have to be an objective and logical observer. That's why I can never have any respect for Dante's breakdowns, because a lot of the times he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, or he has no consistency.
A little bit of sense is if Gervonta Tank Davis is definitely going to fight the winner. Now, there's something else about what Floyd Mayweather said that doesn't make sense to me. When Floyd says it doesn't work that way, the best fighting the best, Floyd Mayweather fought Diego Corrales at age 23. There's probably only 2 times when Floyd Mayweather was a slight underdog going into the fight. That's when he fought Diego.
I think all Floyd Mayweather Jr. meant is that sometimes it's nice to let a fight marinate and kind of build up. And on top of that, with the promotions and with certain things that happen with the type of power that boxers may have over today, over their money, and because of so many different promotions, and there was different promotions back then as well, but it's a little bit different today with the way the business works. A lot of these boxers, they have more power in who they're able to fight and what's able to happen, so it's a little bit different. I think that's really all what Floyd meant. I don't think he meant anything negative by it necessarily, or that a lot of fighters are ducking. I just think he meant that the business side of boxing is a little bit different today.
Corrales, and when he fought Genaro Hernandez, which around that time he was around, 21 years old? So when Floyd Mayweather says it doesn't work that way, where the best fights the best, I don't agree with that. But I don't have a problem with Floyd Mayweather saying it's about timing, because if it's about timing, means there's a guarantee that Gervonta is going to fight a Shakur Stevenson or Devin Haney eventually when they're still undefeated. There's no doubt about it. Gervonta Tank Davis versus...
So apparently it's okay for Gervonta Tank Davis to eventually fight those guys. But when Canelo Alvarez said eventually that he was going to fight Bivol and all these other guys, apparently he was avoiding those guys. So once again, I understand a lot of the points that Dante brings up, but this dude half the time is so full of shit. It just is what it is. And that's why a lot of the times I like to review his videos. Because Dante is one of these guys that, he loves to preach, and bitch, moan, and complain about, how he's so righteous compared to a lot of these other dudes. Dude, all Dante is the pro-black version of ESPN. He's just the Black Lives Matter version of ESPN. That's all he is. Which seems like it has a great message, on the outside. But when you really take a look at it on the inside, a lot of it is fraudulent.
Teofimo Lopez would be a huge fight. It's not going to be as big as Gervonta versus Devin or Shakur, but it will be a really big fight, especially...
Well, if you're talking about Gervonta versus Teofimo, I'm not quite so sure about that. If Teofimo is actually able to beat Josh Taylor, that'd be a very particularly interesting fight. That actually may potentially be bigger than either of those fighters, because Teofimo does have great star appeal. He's going to have the Latino fan base behind him. He's a knockout puncher. He's also a very decent boxer. If he was able to come back and become a 2-weight division champion, that'd be a huge fight.
If Lopez can beat Josh Taylor, which won't be easy.
But do I believe that Teofimo will beat Josh Taylor? Not more than likely, but you never know. Because Josh Taylor did look a little bit off in the Jack Catterall fight, but I assume more than likely that was just going to be one bad performance, because I think it's very possible that he underestimated the ability of Jack Catterall.
But the best news out of this whole situation is that means that if Shakur Stevenson can't get Gervonta Tank Davis next, he's Devin Haney's mandatory, which means if Shakur Stevenson really wants to fight for all of the belts, that fight is going to be easy to make. Because Devin already has a working relationship with Top Rank and ESPN, he'll be a free agent by that time, and the winner of that fight will have even more leverage going into negotiations with Gervonta Tank Davis. It'll be really interesting to see what happens after the Devin Haney versus Lomachenko fight. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out.
Anyways, I just thought that was very interesting, but the way that these careers are going to go down is going to be very particularly interesting. Who do I believe, if we are calling them, quote-unquote, the 3 kings, at least of the 135-pound weight division, who do I believe will come out on top? If I had to guess, either Gervonta Tank Davis or that of Shakur Stevenson, but I could see Devin Haney as well. I was actually watching a video by a YouTube channel that I formerly watched, but a Patreon channel now. I was watching it, The Chronicles of Judah. Great channel, by the way, for those of you that have never watched him. He brought up a point that I also agreed with, a very interesting point, which is that Shakur Stevenson, even though just like I believed, just as he said that Shakur Stevenson is going to be very interesting to see how well his power translates, because what it has told him so far, that with his lack of knockouts, at least at the early part in his career, especially facing guys that really are not that high of quality, that if he's not been able to get knockouts at the current moment in time, in a time where he really should be able to, how well is his power really going to carry up the weight divisions? Because when you get in the ring with Gervonta Tank Davis, that power is going to be for real. And that is going to be some level of power that he has never felt. Same with Devin Haney. I don't think that Devin Haney nor Shakur Stevenson are ever going to be super powerful punchers. They're just not going to be. Sometimes punches are made. Sometimes punchers do get a little bit, better later on. But, usually when you see them move up a weight class, or, usually when they're not getting a great amount of knockouts, especially against guys that they're pretty much already bigger than, they're not usually going to be known as very big punchers later on down the line. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Who do I personally believe will come out on top? I think it's either going to be Gervonta Tank Davis or Shakur. But right now, I would predict Gervonta Tank Davis. That is if he does improve his offensive output in those two fights, which I think that more than likely he would. But we'll see. But anyways, that's really about it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.